parks. So this is, while I do usually talk on our national parks to students, this is my friend's presentation, so I'm going to actually use the notes that you just the notes that were there. So I'm going to do a little bit of reading off the slides and actually just talking because there is some information here that my friend felt necessary to convey. My friend works in the international office and usually works with parks and countries across the world to assist in any way that we can in the creation of and the continuation of national parks across the world. So national parks are thought of as America's best idea, and so 1872, Yellowstone National Park is created. It actually wasn't created first as a national park, so just to give you guys a little background on when I say national park and national monument, not everything that we protect or preserve has the same designation. So they have different designations, and you'll hear me throw them out, like National Monument, which the president has the authority to create on his own. National Parks, which have to be created by an act of Congress. The park where I work at is Gateway National Recreation Area. It was created in 1972 as the first of its kind to enable people to recreate and appreciate nature and history in an urban area. So Yellowstone was the first one that was created in 1872, and these are places that were created not as gardens, private gardens for royalty. They were created for all the American people to enjoy. And so part of our mission is to protect and preserve for future generations so that what we are enjoying is what future generations can enjoy. No, that's right. Right. Okay. So, sorry. Oh, that doesn't. Okay. Okay, so what this is showing here is Old Faithful. So Old Faithful is one of the features in Yellowstone that actually erupts regularly, and it's a big popular tourist attraction. So, so this is talking about Yellowstone or Hot Springs National Park. So while Hot Springs was preserved as a natural area first, possibly, it wasn't preserved as a national park or national monument before Yellowstone. So just a little bit of background. So the next slide is going to be the founding fathers of the National Park Service. So this is Stephen Mather in the center, Horace Albright. And so we actually had a Department of the Interior before we had the National Park Service, and we had national parks before we had a service to manage and operate them. So they were first designated as national monuments, as places where people were discovering as part of the New West. And quickly the government realized these places were getting overrun by people who wanted to do some exploring within their country and who wanted to see the natural spaces and to see history in the western areas. And so they decided we have to do something to protect this. And so it was a combination of industrialists and just big thinkers of the time. So one who isn't in here is Gifford Pinchot, who created the Forest Service. And so really they came together and actually appealed to the government that the National Park Service would be created. And so of course the government's like, well, someone's gonna have to run it, so how about you? So that's one of the things that happened. And one of the things that, so we actually had a lot of people who really promoted environmentalism in the United States, and one who is not even here is John Muir. So John Muir was actually from Scotland, but came to America, discovered the mountains and forests of the West, and wrote about it so prolifically that he's actually one of the people that contributed to the great influx of people coming into our natural areas in the West that necessitated the need for a service to manage it. So we actually, in addition to getting areas that were designated as national monuments, we actually had a lot of areas that were transferred over from the military, such as national battlefields, national cemeteries, and so those are some of the other early additions to the National Park Service. Okay, so this is a map of U.S. public land management. So we don't just have one agency to manage U.S. public lands. We have a variety of agencies, and they all have their own purpose. So you'll see a lot over here. There's a lot of yellow and red and different colors, and there's not as much over here. So since this part of the country is older, this was the original 13 colonies over here. So we actually have a lot of areas that are protected as parkland, but they tend to be a lot of state parks because the states were around before and making parks before the nation was creating parks. And so what you find mostly here is a lot of historic sites. And so those fall underneath the National Park Service as National Historic Sites. So that's just one example. So out west, we have the Bureau of Reclamation. That's another Department of Interior Bureau. Bureau of Reclamation deals with dams, and the managing the power that comes out of those dams. The Fish and Wildlife Service deals with a lot of our wildlife refuges, which tend to be populated by birds. They also do another cool job of monitoring for trafficked and poached animals coming into our airports. So one of the things they do is when they go and they do a presentation or they table at an event, they'll bring, if they can, small animals that were taken by officials, by Fish and Wildlife Service officials, and they'll also have the products. So say somebody brought in a small alligator that's endangered, they'll also then possibly have the belt and the bags that go with them and the shoes just to show the impact of this animal being killed. So it's not just a dead animal, this dead animal is also being found in these other forms. And so it's to help people be mindful of the purchases that they make in the United States. So another department of the Interior Bureau is mining, which does occur in the United States. BLM actually is another bureau. They deal with excess land that is not homesteaded or owned privately. So it's held by the government and people have the option to lease. So that's just an example of all the land over here. We also have a lot of land in, this is Alaska, and this is Hawaii. So for geographic reference, Alaska is really about here, and Hawaii is really down there. So on our maps, we put them together because otherwise we wouldn't be able to make a map big enough for anybody, really. Go this way. So this is an example of the organization chart for the National Park Service. So we have a director, currently John Jarvis. Above John Jarvis is Sally Jewell. So Sally Jewell manages the Department of the Interior, and he reports directly to her. So we break things up by departments so that we can really have a good grasp on the work that we're doing and try to complete it as best and thoroughly as possible. So currently we have an associate director for workforce and inclusion, and that is to increase the diversity of the workforce that we have in the National Park Service to ensure that it really reflects the diversity of the United States. So it's not just all one ethnic group, it's everybody, and so that all of our visitors, when they come to our parks, can see their faces and their history represented in our workforce. Natural resources and stewardship, that's our plants and animals. So our plants and animals are usually managed by biologists and wildlife experts, and so they fall under this director. Partnerships. So we recognize that we can't do a lot of the work that we do alone. We have a lot of civilian groups that are non-governmental groups, and we cannot do a lot of the work that we do without them. These are people who help us recruit students, who advocate for us. We have one official fundraising partner for the National Park Service, that's the National Park Foundation. We also have an advocacy group that advocates for the National Park Service. We have dozens and dozens of non-official governmental groups that help us do the work. And sometimes it's not even just in helping us do the work. Sometimes it's about us engaging the youth. And one of our partners is the YMCA, which is it started off as the Young Men's Christian Association. So that's one of our partners, and they help us really reach out to youth in urban areas and to teach them about the power of natural areas and public lands. We also reach out to the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, and we do a lot of work with them. We try to do a lot of programs with them, and we like to get them to see us as a learning tool. Business services. We actually have a lot of businesses that operate within the National Park Service. We have lodges, we have hotels. On occasion we have leasing, concessioners. So when people come to a park, they don't just come to a park and there's nothing there. Usually we keep the natural space natural, but maybe near the visitor center there may be a store, there may be food options. So business service usually deals with that. Visitor and resource protection. We don't have poachers in large scale the way that I understand that you guys do. We do have people who actually dig out mostly plants. Usually that's what we have to deal with. People stealing plants, people trying to steal animals for private use. So our visitor and resource protection is to make sure our visitors are safe from our resources, and our resources are safe from our visitors, to make sure you leave with no trace of the park other than pictures. And so sometimes we do have people coming into the parks and doing illegal activities. That's where this directorate would fall into play. Cultural resources. We have a lot of cultural resources. This is oftentimes forts, fortifications, dating back from the colonial period. We also have historic houses and historic sites. So we have the site where the Women's Rights Convention in upstate New York was signed. We have Martin Luther King's house. And so that's one site that we operate as a partnership with his family, because they do still play a large role in keeping his memory. Park planning. So this one over here, interpretation, education, and volunteer, that's the department that I fall under. So when you come to a park, it's my department's job to make sure you know what you're looking at, so I find out why you're here, and so that you know why we have preserved and protected this thing for as many years as we have. In one case, it was a fort that's been around for 200 years, so we want to make sure you know the absolute value of why this thing is here, because if you don't know the value, and I haven't told you the value of what you're looking at, does it hold value to you in the future? And do we need to protect and preserve it? So that's a very important role that we play. We also rely heavily on volunteers. We don't have enough staff to really protect everything. So we have a very strong volunteer program, and volunteers come in, they log their hours, and on occasion, they may receive like a jacket or an award for having done their service. So we do recognize the powerful work that volunteers do. We also have regional directorates. So it's a big country, takes about 7 hours just to fly from one coast to the other. We have Alaska, which is big on its own. Pacific, Intermountain. So Alaska's on the far end, Pacific's on the west coast, going all the way to the east coast, which is the northeast region. So that's the region that I am in. 413 different park models. Not every park operates the same. Statue of Liberty, Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island. It's a very, very functional operation. We don't operate the boats. Somebody gets you on the boats. When you get off, you are shepherded through your visit to the statue. It's very uniform. You can have your own experience, but essentially that's the kind of experience you have. Up here on the left is New Orleans Jazz. New Orleans Jazz does music performances on the regular, and their rangers have to play an instrument.
Wow.
Yeah. So every park is different. Every park functions differently. They operate differently. We all have guiding principles that we do have to operate by. We do have strict codes that we are held to. We cannot accept gifts. We cannot do favors. When we travel, our travel is limited. So we really keep ourselves in check with a strict series of rules that even go to our internet usage. So it's really cool. This one is one that I hope to visit. This is a fort. So anybody know who Abraham Lincoln is?
Yeah.
Okay. So there was a man, John Wilkes Booth, who shot Lincoln. The doctor who fixed him up, who fixed the shooter up so that he could continue traveling, was eventually captured and sent to this fort, Fort Jefferson, in the middle of the Caribbean with nothing around it. It was horrible conditions, but as you can see, we do still tell the story of Fort Jefferson, but now we've adapted it so that people can go snorkeling. It's a historic site, but they can go snorkeling, they can go camping there. And so we've adapted the use of the park while still telling the story. We make sure that visitors are able to engage the site in the way that they really want to, without harming the actual resource itself. This is Ford's Theater. It's funny, I just mentioned that. This is the Golden Gate Bridge. Golden Gate National Recreation Area is the sister park to my park. They were both created at the same time and the same designation. So, I mean, there's a bunch of other parks that I don't really know too well. So this shows how our regions are broken down. So I am over there in New York City. And nobody ever believes that we have a national park in New York City, but we actually have 12. Most of them are historic sites, except for our national recreation area. So division of duties among NPS staff. We do not do it all by ourselves. No person can operate the National Park Service on their own. We recognize this deeply. It's truly teamwork effort. So our maintenance staff keep us running. They keep our lights on, they keep our electricity running, they fix our vehicles, they take care of every little problem that's a structural problem within the park. They make sure our garbage is collected, our refuge is recycled, and we also have firefighting. So my friend right now is on a wildland firefighting team. We're trying to make sure that our forests don't burn down and that resources are protected, homes are protected, and so actually the firefighting team works in conjunction with other departments' firefighting teams. So it's not just us and them, they all come together and they work together. Search and rescue staff, we do have visitors that occasionally have an accident. We have visitors that just don't listen. So when we tell you don't go too close to that cliff and you go too close to that cliff, sometimes you need to get rescued, and they will put their lives at line to rescue our visitors. Exotic plant management team. A lot of people came to America from a lot of different places. They brought a lot of different plants that don't belong in America. It's one thing, we have some plants that have adapted and not grown invasive and taken over and consumed the natural environment. Same thing with fish and birds and other things. We do have exotic plants and animals that have taken over and are considered a nuisance or a threat to the natural environment. So we do have an exotic plant management team. We have law enforcement. They do everything from riding bicycles around the National Mall. This is actually not snow. This is cherry blossoms in early spring for the Cherry Blossom Festival. So we do rely heavily on our law enforcement because we have government structures where we have a federal level, a state level, and a local level. So because we are on federal land, we do need our own law enforcement because local governments do not have jurisdiction in our federal lands. So that's why we need law enforcement. Interpretation education, like I said, what are we looking at? What do you want to learn? We work with schools, we work with kids, we try actually to develop programming within our parks, specifically for specific grades, and we try to tie it into their educational curriculum so that they don't have to just sit in a classroom and learn. They get to come out into the class, and we call it experiential learning, because the learning's taking place, but you're actually experiencing something and not just sitting in the class, snoring and everything. Support and partners. So like I mentioned earlier, the National Parks Foundation, they have been the strong supporter of our 2016 Centennial campaign, which is the Find Your Park campaign. We also launched a joint program called Encuentra tu Parque, because the second language that most of our visitors is Spanish. So Encuentra tu Parque, this is the hashtag. I don't know if you guys do this over here. Hashtag. So it's hashtag Find Your Park or hashtag Encuentra tu Parque. So that's the National Park Foundation. So we have, like I said, a strong support from volunteers, National Parks Conservation Association. This is our advocacy partner. So they do advocacy work that we are legally not allowed to. We are banned by federal rules from doing these things. So I can't go in my uniform to my local congressperson, to my mayor, to any elected official on my own unless I am authorized by my park to do so. So I can't, we're very strict on that sort of thing. We do have over 240,000 volunteers in 2015. That is spread across all 50 states and our territories, which are Guam, American Samoa, and Puerto Rico. So that represents $100+ million in labor that they are helping us with. And they do this at their own time. They don't get paid at all. Yeah. It's love of the parks. They love the parks, and they'll come out and do it. And actually what we have is, we have a lot of people who are retired, who want to still do something. They want to be active, they want to contribute, and so a lot of times they'll go live in a park for 6 months out of the year or 2 months, and that's their vacation. And maybe they sit at the visitor desk. One time it was a photographer. Some retired people will get in a caravan and they'll drive across the country and they'll volunteer at different parks just so that they can give back in a way that young people can't while they are still in the process of studying and looking for employment. So this is their way of giving back. International volunteers. So I don't know where these guys are, but I actually did have one of my interns, and so my interns were technically volunteers who were paid. One of my interns was from Lithuania. It took an excessive amount of work to bring her on because this was now a foreign person trying to attempt work in the United States, but she knew every document she needed. She had a school in the United States that would help her with it. She did the work that was required. So I told her, and this is my own experience, that if she would do the work that she needed to do, I'd do the work that I need to do, and so I did have my own international volunteer this year. And now I have a place to stay in Lithuania. Park planning. This is Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. So actually this right here, went too far. This right here doesn't happen often. This is the volcano. So Hawaii is a series of islands. It's a chain of islands, and it is actually still moving. The plate that Hawaii is on is still moving, and the hot spot that is underneath Hawaii stays in one place, and eventually it will create another island. So this is actually something that people don't get to see too often. This is when the lava flow actually emerges and meets the ocean. So part of what our job when this happens is to keep people away from it. Because people see a pretty shiny thing, and it's dangerous. And everybody wants a picture, selfie, huh? Everybody wants a selfie with this, so park planning. Park planning is not just keeping visitors away from the dangerous shiny object. Park planning is like what we had to see with one of our parks, which is Arches National Park in Utah. beautiful sandstone arches. They have about 4 or 5 of them. It's a very small town. It's a very small park. They got so popular, they had to rethink the way that visitors approach their park. Do visitors come up directly into their park? Well, they can't during the busy season because that created 6-hour waiting lines to get into the park. It's a nice park. I don't know about 6 hours. That's a little much. So they've had to actually look into the neighboring local town to see if they can do a shuttle service from the local town and deposit people into the park, because they're not going very far in the park. They're just going to really one location, and it is fairly walkable. So park planning is, where are our facilities going to go? Where are people going to go to the bathroom? Where are people going to park? When they get here, what's going to happen with their refuse? Do we even offer refuse services? So we have a leave no trace policy, and on occasion we have actually taken out garbage cans because we cannot get to them quick enough. And so some visitors actually appreciate what we do, and they'll bring a bag with them and pick up refuse that they see on their walks. Some visitors just complain that we are not offering refuse services. So park planning really goes into everything. Facilities, your employees, how are you hiring? How many people are you hiring? So really, we do a lot of work, and it's all very comprehensive, and it all plays into itself. Nothing occurs in a vacuum with what we do. Budget and finance. So this is $2.85 billion budget from U.S. Congress just for the National Park Service. $473 million in additional revenue. That comes from fees from programs, from movie filming, from business ventures that go on within the parks. So actually, we would like this number to be bigger, because we have just even added a 412th park this year, and we need money for staffing, we need money for training. So as big as this is, we'd like it to be bigger. Concessions management. So Xanterra actually is our latest business partner to take over one of these lodges. So that's another thing. We had another corporation that was managing our concessions, and they actually trademarked some of the names of properties within our parks. So right now, Xanterra is the current concessioner for these parks. We did have to rename some of the park names, so it is now currently Old Faithful Inn. So it says a site, one of many sites where 20,000 employees work. Sustainability in the park. So we are trying to be very sustainable. We are trying to minimize our own impact, and so with every building that we do try to ensure that it's solar powered at the very least. We've been experimenting with environmentally friendly building materials. We have to make sure it's not too environmentally friendly, because termites eat one visitor center where I work. And we need the building, we like the termites, but we need the building. So we have to balance that out with sustainability. But we do try to ensure that our practices do not leave any more of a footprint than they do. We have upgraded many of our vehicles to be environmentally friendly, either hybrid or electric vehicles, so that they minimize the carbon impact that we have in the park. And we do try to recycle at every chance that we get. So working with local communities. Really, if we are at odds with the local community that our park exists in, we're going to have a very miserable existence. So a lot of times, maybe a community is upset that at a way that we're approaching something. All it takes is a meeting to sit down and understand why they have this viewpoint so strongly. Is it something that we can do? Is it something that we can alter, or is it something that we have to stay steadfast? That no, we cannot allow you to have motorboats in this area because an endangered fish is here. In my park, we have an endangered bird. The endangered bird is only there in the summer months, so we have to work with the local communities to make sure nests don't get destroyed, but then we also make sure that they know that the rest of the year they can go to the beach. They just have to be careful, and we try to work with them. We try to include native communities in parks that have native heritage. So Mount Rushmore is a great example. Mount Rushmore has the faces of 4 presidents, but it was also sacred to the Native Americans in the surrounding areas. So we do allow them to tell their story right now. So that's one way that we were trying to work with them. Public-private partnerships. So we actually don't, the Ford's Theater, which is where Abraham Lincoln was shot, actually runs shows. So a private partnership ensures that plays are still able to be shown, but we don't run those. Carrying capacity. Let's see. That looks about 290 million visitors. Is that correct? Okay. 290 million visitors. That's a lot of people. That's pretty much our population coming to visit us in 2015. So we do have to make sure that we are promoting parks that maybe get less visitation while it's a high visitation season. And it depends on every park. We have 4 seasons in the United States. So we have spring, summer, fall, and winter. So in the north, some people may not want to come up north because they perceive it as cold. They may want to go to our parks down south. One thing we have been doing is increasing tourism opportunities up north. So maybe you didn't want to go because it's cold. Now maybe you go snowshoeing and you go bird watching while you go snowshoeing. So it's rethinking the way that we approach our seasons to make sure that we actually have continual visitation all year long. Balancing conservation and tourism. Oh my God. They used to feed bears. Bears, that'd be like feeding a lion. Like, hey, I'm gonna feed my lion out of the car. That's probably a bad idea. It's definitely a bad idea. What am I saying? Okay, so right here we have bison. Bison are very large animals. So we have been building back the bison herd. That was one of our Centennial goals, to build back the animal that is so iconic. It's on literally everything that we have. So the question is, how do we manage our populations? How do we manage re-emerging this population while we do increase tourism? So sometimes it is blocking off a road if a lot of bison happen to be congregating in that area. Sometimes they'll just move. So we do have to make sure that our visitors are engaging our animals in a way that we feel is sustainable. We did have a family that put a bison calf that was rejected by its mother into a car. It was rejected for a reason. Rangers tried to reintroduce the bison. It was rejected again. So in the end, they had to put the animal down, which nature would have taken care of it. We had to put the animal down because we didn't have facilities to contain the animal or to transfer it without potentially spreading disease from one herd to another. So these are things that we have to think about when people try to engage animals directly. We've also had selfie problems. We've had people being hit in the body by an elk. What's an animal comparable in size to an elk?
People would take buffalo.
A buffalo. So imagine trying to take a selfie with a buffalo. Buffaloes usually don't like selfies, probably. So there's good video on YouTube. Buffalo ran into the woman, sent her flying. Thankfully, she's okay, but don't take selfies with animals is one thing that we've actually had to tell people. And this is something new. So Pokemon Go is another game. We've had people wandering into places that are inappropriate to play this game in while trying to manage, everybody. So we're trying to protect the parks from the people from the parks. This is the Statue of Liberty. The Statue of Liberty has a long history. She wasn't always well preserved, but we do try to lead in historic preservation, and this is not just the preservation of buildings. We're talking about documents. We're talking about fabrics. We're talking about stonework. So we do try to always innovate when it comes to conservation of not only just natural areas, natural animals, and plants. We try to make sure that our techniques for tangible items that are like the Statue of Liberty or maybe like the Declaration of Independence, we try to make sure that those are top-notch and always advancing, even if we do have to go back and undo previous conservation attempts. So sometimes somebody tries to introduce one species and they do it in a way that really doesn't look at the whole picture, and we don't hesitate to go back and revise our methods. So this is managing cultural sites. So this is part of our Find Your Park campaign. So this is the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, and what they did is juxtapose it against a natural space. Same thing here. This is Jefferson Memorial. This is juxtaposed with a cavern. So really to show people that we are not just one, we are not just our natural spaces or our cultural sites, we are everything, and they do all matter all together. Working with tribal stakeholders. So this is, I guess, a non-NPS site. So we do allow those with native practices to participate and engage their native practices in what used to probably be their homeland. So sometimes we will do programs educating local children, educating all visitors about native practices. Sometimes we will let them take the lead in conservation. We do try to ensure that everybody works up to a standard of conservation and protection that we have designed over 100 years, but many tribes have done a wonderful job of doing that because it is in their interest to make sure their culture is preserved and that their culture is shared in a way that they agree with. So we're not telling them how to share their culture, they're sharing their culture on their own. Future generations. So we actually have a lot of fun ways that we work with future generations. Our best one is the Junior Ranger program. People are so crazy about this program. Families will drag their children to all 400 national parks. That's a lot of territory. There's 50 states. They will drag their kids, and their kids have a full outfit covered in badges because it is an achievement for them to say that they came and they learned about their park so well, they have something literally to show for it. And this is a Junior Ranger badge. They do have to do a book. Sometimes it's just a couple activities. Every park varies. Some have different books for different ages. We did create a Centennial Junior Ranger book, and so we created activities of different levels, and different ages had to complete different amount of activities in order to earn their Junior Ranger badge. And it is something they feel a pride in, because they earned this. And there are little Junior Ranger outfits, and some people do actually go from being a Junior Ranger to being a real Ranger. I have myself Junior Ranger badges, and I will do the book. I will do the work. Parks as classrooms. So this is what I was talking about earlier. We do get park classrooms to come bring their students out and to utilize the classroom as a staging area for the lessons that they will continue in the park. Sometimes we will have it as an ongoing engagement where they start something in the park, they analyze it back at home in their schools, and then they tell us the results of what they're studying. Benefits beyond borders. So this is, I think, one of our international outreach efforts to another country. Let's see. So, what are we waiting for? Oh, this is that. I don't know who this is. Oh, this is the first guardian of Yosemite, Galen Clark. So that's a ranger leading a talk. Okay, so I want to thank you for listening to our presentation. It's quite an honor to be a park ranger, and I should not be on that desk. But thank you for coming, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.
Let's start. Yeah, thank you very much, Jessica Gonzalez. Wonderful presentation. I hope I pronounced the name well.
You did.
I heard you spoke in Spanish. Is that your second language, or are you actually from that? Are you Spanish?
So my parents were born in Puerto Rico, and both came when they were young. I mean, it's part of the United States, but it's, you know, to most people it feels like another country. So they came to America, even though it's part of America. They came to mainland America when they were young and essentially grew up in the United States. So English is my predominant language at home, but I have learned Spanish over the years, and because my neighborhood is not a Spanish neighborhood, I've also attempted to learn the language of my neighborhood, which is Hebrew.